Hello YouTube, welcome to the Educated Barbarian, part 18, focused on the meditations. As you can see, this is a new environment, a new decor, like we say in my language. I'm not sure how the sound is going to be like, so let me know in the comments if you can hear me properly, if there's an echo, because I can't really tell from the recordings. So please let me know, because this might become a place where I make my longer videos, because I cannot be disturbed here with summer and everything. Where I live, there's a lot of activities. So I'm going to be recording the longest portions here. Let's get into book 7 today. How can the great principles of life become dead if the impressions which correspond to them be not extinguished? These impressions you may still rekindle. I can always form the proper opinion of this or that. And if so, why am I disturbed? What is external to my mind is of no consequence to it. Learn this and you stand upright. You can always renew your life. See things again as once you saw them, and your life is made new again. So I think that this speaks to a fear and an anxiety that a lot of people have, that I personally have, that is not necessarily linked to failure, but rather to successes. I don't know about you guys, but for me, when I'm doing something right, there's always the fear in my head that I'm going to eventually mess up. And so my own ability to succeed in the moment creates anxiety that in the future I will not be able to do so. And that's especially true with muscles. I look at myself, I'm like, man, I've progressed, I look much better. And a voice in my brain tells me, what if all of that goes away? What if you managed to do that in the past, but you're not going to be doing it now? A lot of people I know, especially in high stress positions for their job, feel the same type of pressure. And that is something that, again, Stoicism has already encountered, because Marcus Aurelius tells you that if you were once able to do it, then surely you will be able to do it again. What was once yours is yours forever. And the same can be true for memory, by the way. If you have anxiety associated with memories, and for example, you have the idea in your head that you are going to forget something very important, but you also don't want to enter an endless cycle of repetition where you have to note everything down, because that by itself makes your memory worse over time, so it doesn't really help. Well, Marcus Aurelius tells you, hey, if that idea could be birthed inside your mind, then surely, even if you forget it, it'll be birthed again. And it's something that I found where I have an idea for a video, I don't note it down, it disappears, I forget it. But 4 months later, the idea pops out again. Why? It's a recurring thought. It's something that wants out. And since it wants out, when it goes back in, it will by default go out again. And so this is something that can never be lost. And this applies to the great principles of life. And that also applies to values and the fear that they could be extinguished as well, because in a grander scheme of things, if we're talking about societies and the collapse of civilizations, what Marcus Aurelius tells you is that if a society strives off of great values, then loses the values and disappears. The state of disappearance and of ruins is not forever, because the values that made the ruins possible by building the city in the first place will re-emerge. And they will re-emerge because they are not endemic to the people that built the city. They are endemic to humans. And that is a very important message. Genius, great ideas, kindness, all sorts of positive values cannot be lost. It's in our DNA. It's not just cultural. Even if society as a whole, the entire planet, decided to just get rid of that, yes, we would see a great uptick of negative tendencies and toxicity, but positivity and beneficial values wouldn't disappear, because they are logical, and what is logical is from the source and will always re-emerge. The real always makes a comeback, always. So as it says, you can rekindle those things, and you shouldn't be disturbed by them. And that goes also for people who might have lost their way, which is something that happens in life. You're going to get out of the path. It is fine. You found the path once, you can find it again. Your vain concern for shows, for stage plays, for flocks and herds, your combats, are as bones cast for the contention of puppies, as baits dropped into a fish pond, as the toil of ants and the burdens that they bear, as the scampering of frightened mice or the antics of puppets jerked by wires. It is then your duty amid all of this to stand firm, kindly and not proud, yet to understand that a man's worth is just the worth of that which he pursues. So first half of the paragraph is the concern for external things, which are mostly escapism. What he's talking about here is escapism, and I like the fact that he also uses the metaphor of the bait dropped into a fish pond, because in reality, when you pursue pleasure, you are getting hooked. And so you think that you're pursuing pleasure for pleasure's sake, which is really for your sake, but in reality, it's for pleasure's sake, if you go back to the original concept, because pleasure ends up owning you. If you constantly seek out pleasure, pleasure is not a slave to you, you're a slave to pleasure. And that's true for many things in life. So it's great that Marcus Aurelius actually points that out, because external things are not just disturbance. It's not just something that is going to take your mind and focus away from the internal. It's also something that could remove you from that space entirely. Because people who seek escapism end up losing touch with reality entirely, meaning they lose touch with themselves, and that is much more dangerous than just all distraction here and there. And so, your duty amidst all of that, because you're going to see people around you indulge in these things, and in reality, if you're my age or around my age or younger, you might be a minority. You might look around and you might even have people who try and make you feel bad about this, meaning that people are going to try and make you feel like, since you're not doing what everyone else is doing, there must be something wrong with you. And it's a reflection I listened to just an hour ago. I was listening to a guy talking about nihilism and about Nietzsche, and because I'm preparing the next cycle of Educated Barbarian, which we have plenty of times, but what he was saying was that again and again, when someone is independent, and especially when someone is trying to apply stoicism to their life and they're not tied down to earthly things and earthly temptations, the flock and the weak-minded who do succumb to that tend to point that out as selfishness. And in my head, I saw the image of a group of people tied to a tree by a chain for a reason, and they look at someone going free around them, and they point that person and say, hey, by you not being with us, chained to the tree, you are showing that you're selfish, you're not with the group. And even though Stoicism is supposed to be for the greater good of the group, there comes a time where the individual defines the group by its decision to be a part of it or not. And a healthy group cannot be made up of unhealthy individuals and vice versa. Because what is good for the bee is good for the swarm, but what is bad for the bee is also bad for the swarm. We've touched upon that last time. So keep that in mind. And I like the last sentence. A man's worth is the worth of that which he pursues. You are not born good or bad. You are not born valuable or not. What you do in your life and the way you approach life makes you a good person or not. That is very important. In conversation, we should give good heed to what is said, and in every enterprise we should attend to what is done. In the latter case, at once look to the end in view, and in the former, not the meaning intended. So we spoke about that before, but it's pretty much the idea of mindfulness, of being present in the instant, and of applying yourself fully to everyday situation, because between not applying yourself and applying yourself is always better. After that, it's also a choice of making decisions and trying to find out in which situation you want to engage in, but everything you do in life, you should do 100%. And if you find things that you don't do 100%, chances are they were forced upon you, or you're lying to yourself and you don't really like them, in which case, in both cases, you should sever these things out from your life. Is my understanding sufficient for this business or not? If it be sufficient, I use it for the work in hand as an instrument given to me by nature. If it be not sufficient, I either give place to one better fitted for the achievement, or, if for some reason this not be a proper course, I do it as best I can, taking the aid of those who, by directing my mind, can accomplish something fit and serviceable for the common good. For all that I do, whether by myself or with the help of others, should be directed solely towards what is fit and useful for the public service. So here, functional, it's, in terms of advice, it is really a useful, a utilitarian advice in a sense. He's explaining to you how you should function in society in the context of business, right? Which is, the modern age didn't invent business. Business has always existed. The transaction, the financial exchanges, it's always been there. It'll always be there. An idea of a postmodern society which removes it, one, is anachronical because we have evolved towards always specialization when it comes to the exchange of goods, where now it's fully virtual, but that's something that we built up to. And you can argue that it's not necessarily a good thing. I would agree with that. But we will not be going back to the Stone Age. It's not possible. So you need to embrace business and the business mindset. So he's also telling you to be able to assess your abilities, which is extremely important, because in a job, you have a job, your boss or whoever tells you to do something. If you say yes, but you fail, it's much worse than if you just said no, because it means that you couldn't assess your abilities properly. And that is going to be used against you, because it means that you are not self-aware. You are not in touch with who you are. If you do accept, however, so if you say no, the good thing to do is to find someone else to mentor you, or someone else to just do it. There is no shame in saying, I cannot do this thing. This person can, for the better good of the people. I will let that person do that, and I will use my time to do something else. If you decide, however, to do it, you do it to the best of your ability. And that again applies to everything in life, not just business. Be not ashamed of taking assistance. It is laid upon you to do your part, as on a soldier when the war is stormed. What then, if you are lame and cannot scale the battlements alone, but can with another's help? Very important, a point that I'm sure most people who think they're applying Stoicism in their life gloss over entirely. The idea that the Stoic, one, is not solitary. Two, the Stoic doesn't refuse help from people. The Stoic is not some guy on top of a mountain who just exists by himself for the sole purpose of himself. It actually goes completely in contradiction with Stoicism as explained by Marcus Aurelius. But on top of that, the Stoic is not pride. He's not proud, meaning that he is confident, but not so much that he will think his own value as being inflated. He will always accept help, especially if it's going to help the group in the long run. So don't be ashamed of taking assistance. Don't be ashamed of asking assistance. Only be ashamed of asking for assistance if you know deep down that you're not going to make any use of the help. That to me is a cardinal sin. I cannot stand when people do that. When someone asks for your help, then they give up or they just don't follow your advice. Why did you ask in the first place? Well, it was because the action of asking was a way to replace the effort. But that's a topic that I'm going to touch upon in later videos, because I have certain fitness concepts that actually are quite correlated to that. Be not troubled about the future. You will come to it, if need be, with the same power to reason as you use upon your present business. So that goes back to the very first paragraph, because if you are in the instant capable to handle your business, in 2 months' time, you still will be. So the future and the events that will happen in 2 months could be handled by you right now. So why are you upset or anxious that they're going to happen in the future? You will be fine. You will be able to handle them. No problem. In the reasoning being to act according to nature is to act according to reason. So just a quick sum up, but understand also that this is a book of thoughts that have been collected throughout weeks and months and years, but makes a lot of sense for people who might still be a little bit confused. So what is nature exactly? Because when Marcus Aurelius says nature, you might picture birds and trees, but here we're talking about reason. Nature is the natural inclination of the world to do things a certain way. And reason, in this sense, can only be apprehended by logic. So that's the triangular relationship that we entertain with these two environments. You are human, applying logic to understand the real which gave birth to you. So if you're missing one of these three, then you're an incomplete human. If you reject the real, which many people nowadays do, you're incomplete because now you can't apply logic. And in reality, it also means that you're not really human anymore. If you can't apply logic, you can't assess the real. So same thing, you don't understand the environment you live in. And if you don't think you're human, well, I mean, you're a lost case. So that's very important. I like this one a lot because it's just so straightforward, but be upright either by nature or by correction. So here, it's basically saying and throwing out the idea that everyone can be quote unquote moral, anyone can be righteous. It's not something you're born with, there's not a righteous gene, it is a decision. And here, in this very sense, by nature would mean that you have existed in a real environment that made it so that you became much more suited to being upright. But it also means that those who didn't have that can still be upright. And that really applies to the discussion between genetics and environment. A lot of people will tell you, oh, you're born and it's all genetics and it's predetermined. That, of course, is nonsense. But then you have the people who talk about environmental determinism and the very strong influence that your environment will have on you as you grow up. And these people have a point because, of course, yes, we all have the power to be what we want to be and to make good decisions, but it is much easier for certain people in certain environments, and some of the people are going to be dragged down. That being said, it's still not impossible. And if it's not impossible and there is a chance, then there is no excuse not to do it. That's what Marcus Aurelius is trying to get at here. Because Stoicism is really a mindset for everyone. It's not reserved to an elite. That's very important. Because a lot of people who think they're modern Stoic think they're better than everyone else. But by thinking you're better, you also might be thinking that the efforts that got you there were either justified by you being superior at birth, or that you furnished such a strong amount of work to get there that it's not possible for anyone else. And in both cases, Marcus Aurelius tells you that is nonsense. And I think I'm going to check the time. And we're going to stop here. So again, thank you for watching. We are moving forward as always. I hope you are enjoying this read as well. And I'll talk to you next week.